What's up, everyone? If you thought 2026 couldn't get any more dramatic, buckle up because we've got a story that involves billions of dollars, a century old tunnel, thousands of jobs, and wait for it, President Trump wants buildings named after him. I'm not making this up. Just hours ago, a federal judge made a ruling that saved one of America's most critical infrastructure projects from complete shutdown. We're talking about the Gateway Tunnel Project, a $16 billion undertaking that connects New York and New Jersey, and it was literally minutes away from grinding to a halt. So grab your coffee, hit that like button, and let's dive into this absolute roller coaster of political drama, infrastructure chaos, and what might be the most bizarre negotiating tactic we've seen in years. All right, first things first. What even is the Gateway Tunnel Project? Imagine you're one of 200,000 commuters who travel between New York and New Jersey every single day. You're relying on rail tunnels under the Hudson River that were built during the Taft administration. Yeah, we're talking over 100 years old. These tunnels handle 425 trains daily and carry about 20% of the nation's GDP through them. Let that sink in. One-fifth of America's economic activity depends on infrastructure. That's older than your great-grandparents. Hurricane Sandy absolutely devastated these tunnels back in 2012, flooding them with millions of gallons of salt water. Since then, they've needed constant emergency repairs that disrupt travel on the nation's most heavily used passenger rail line. It's basically like driving a car that keeps breaking down on the highway, except this car is carrying hundreds of thousands of people and billions of dollars in economic activity. So the Gateway Project was designed to do two things: build a brand new tunnel to ease congestion and repair those aging tunnels without completely shutting down service. The project would generate nearly $20 billion in economic activity and sustain 90,000 jobs. This isn't just some nice-to-have upgrade. This is critical infrastructure that the entire Northeast Corridor depends on. Under President Biden's administration, the project got a massive boost with about $15 billion in federal funding approved. New York and New Jersey agreed to split the remaining $3 billion or so. Nearly $2 billion has already been spent. Construction was humming along, and giant boring equipment was literally in place at Newark Penn Station, ready to spiral through a mile of rock under the Hudson River. Everything was on track. And then October happened. On September 30th, the Trump administration dropped a bombshell. They froze the funding, not delayed it, not paused it for review, froze it over $205 million in reimbursements that had already been approved by Congress were suddenly withheld. The official reason: the Department of Transportation said they needed to review the project's compliance with new prohibitions against race and sex-based considerations in contracting decisions. Basically, they claimed it was about DEI principles. But here's where it gets interesting. The Gateway Development Commission immediately responded. They confirmed they had complied with all of the Trump administration's requests. By January, they conducted reviews, made changes, and submitted documentation. They did everything asked of them, and then crickets. No response from the Department of Transportation. The funding remained frozen. Fast forward to late January, and the Gateway Commission announced they were down to their last dollars. They had been tapping their remaining operating budget to keep construction going, but that money was set to run out on Friday, February 7th. That's literally today as this video goes live. Officials from New York and New Jersey warned that if the funding wasn't restored by Friday, the project would stop completely. We're talking about 1,000 construction workers being laid off immediately, with thousands more jobs potentially disappearing if the shutdown continued. Construction sites would have to be mothballed and secured. All that momentum, all that progress, just stopped. Now you might be thinking, okay, but there must be more to this story. And oh boy, you would be absolutely right. Here's where this story goes from concerning to completely surreal. According to multiple sources who spoke to ABC News, President Trump recently suggested he would unfreeze the $16 billion in funding under one condition. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had to support renaming Penn Station in Midtown Manhattan and Dulles International Airport in Virginia after Trump himself. I'll give you a moment to process that. The President of the United States was allegedly holding $16 billion in congressionally approved infrastructure funding hostage in exchange for getting his name on buildings. Trump Tower apparently wasn't enough. We're talking about demanding Trump Penn Station and Trump Dulles Airport as the price for allowing critical infrastructure work to continue. Senator Schumer, according to sources, rejected this offer outright. A Schumer official said the senator has nothing to trade because the president stopped the funding and can restart it with a snap of his fingers without any congressional action needed. This wasn't a negotiation. This was already approved funding that Congress had allocated. The Democratic response was, well, let's just say they weren't thrilled. Representative Frank Pallone had perhaps the best burn. If he wants something named for him, I've got plenty of. Landfill in Middlesex or Monmouth County, maybe a Superfund site. I'll name something after him. New York Governor Kathy Hochul's press office posted a photo on social media showing Trump Tower digitally renamed as Hochul Tower, calling it her counteroffer. The sass levels were off the charts. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand called the suggestion ridiculous, saying these naming rights aren't tradable as part of any negotiations, and neither is the dignity of New Yorkers. She added that Trump continues to put his own narcissism over the good-paying union jobs this project provides. Meanwhile, construction workers at the Hudson Tunnel worksite were left in limbo. As shop steward Guido Riviecchio put it perfectly, we are the pawns between both parties. They're arguing, and at the end of the day, who gets hurt? The workers. Faced with an impending shutdown and what they saw as blatant political retribution, New York and New Jersey decided to take the fight to court. On Tuesday night, New York Attorney General Letitia James and New Jersey Acting Attorney General Jennifer Davenport filed a lawsuit in federal court in Manhattan. They argued that the funding suspension violated the Administrative Procedure Act and was based on Trump's desire to punish political rivals. The lawsuit was blunt. It alleged that the funding had been halted because President Trump is engaged in political retribution against Democratic leaders in New York and New Jersey. They pointed out that Congress had already appropriated the money, that all compliance requirements had been met, and that continuing the freeze would cause irreparable harm. The Gateway Development Commission also filed its own lawsuit in federal court in Washington, alleging that the Department of Transportation breached its contractual obligations by withholding the funds without legal basis. Both lawsuits asked for the same thing, a declaration that the funding suspension is unlawful and an immediate order to resume payments so construction could continue without interruption. The states argued that suspending the project would damage their economies, put thousands of jobs in jeopardy, saddle them with costs from securing idled construction sites, and force hundreds of thousands of commuters to rely on decaying, century-old rail infrastructure that could fail at any moment. Governor Mickey Sherrill of New Jersey said the decision to freeze funding was arbitrary and politically motivated and plainly illegal. As the Friday deadline approached, the pressure mounted. Would the judge rule in time? Would construction workers show up Monday morning with jobs, or would they be joining the unemployment line? And then, in dramatic fashion, just hours after construction was supposed to halt, U.S. District Judge Jeanette Vargas in Manhattan delivered her ruling. The judge granted a temporary restraining order prohibiting the Trump administration from withholding the $16 billion in federal funding. In her court filing, Judge Vargas was crystal clear. New York and New Jersey would suffer irreparable harm if the Trump administration continued to withhold funding. She wrote, "Plaintiffs have adequately shown that the public interest would be harmed by a delay in a critical infrastructure project. The ruling keeps the Gateway project going while the lawsuit continues. It's a temporary injunction, meaning this legal battle isn't over yet. But for now, construction can continue." Attorney General Letitia James celebrated the decision, calling it a critical victory for workers and commuters in New York and New Jersey. She said, "I am grateful the court acted quickly to block this senseless funding freeze, which threatened to derail a project our entire region depends on. The Hudson Tunnel project is one of the most important infrastructure projects in the nation, and we will keep fighting to ensure construction can continue without unnecessary federal interference." Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer added, "This is great news for New York, New Jersey, our economy, our workers, and our commuters. Donald Trump should do the right thing and end the freeze to let Gateway move forward once and for all." Representative Josh Gottheimer, who has been pushing Republicans to support the project, said simply, "Cut the political crap, do the right thing, keep these tunnels on track, and let's figure this out." The White House has not yet said whether it will appeal the ruling, but you can bet this story is far from over. So where does this leave us? For now, those 1,000 construction workers still have their jobs. The project that's supposed to carry 1/5 of America's GDP continues. The boring equipment at Newark Penn Station can start drilling through that mile of rock, and hundreds of thousands of commuters can breathe a little easier knowing work is continuing on infrastructure they desperately need. But the bigger questions remain. Why was this funding frozen in the first place? Was it really about DEI compliance, or was it political retribution? Did the president really try to leverage a critical infrastructure funding for naming rights? And what happens next in this legal battle? What we know for certain is that critical infrastructure in America shouldn't be a political football. These tunnels are over 100 years old, they were badly damaged by Hurricane Sandy, and they need replacement. This isn't a partisan issue. This is about keeping America moving, keeping people employed, and maintaining infrastructure that our economy depends on. The fact that a judge had to intervene hours before a shutdown deadline to protect a congressionally approved project tells you everything you need to know about how dysfunctional our political system has become. But for today, at least, it's a win for common sense, it's a win for workers, and it's a win for everyone who depends on these tunnels. What do you think about all this? Should infrastructure funding be subject to political negotiations? Should presidents be able to freeze congressionally approved funds? And seriously, what's with the naming thing? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video informative, smash that like button, subscribe for more news breakdowns, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in this ongoing saga. Because trust me, this story is far from over,